Oberleutnant Hans-Ulrich Rudel, Stuka pilot, Luftwaffe. His foxhole account and detailed memoirs of the Kuban Bridgehead provide the most vivid, emotionally powerful perspective of German forces under Hitler's obsessive orders. You do not fight a battle you cannot win. Every soldier knows it. Every commander repeats it. Every strategist across Europe, from the frozen tundras of Russia to the sun-scorched fields of Africa, has learned it. Survival requires pragmatism, withdrawal when the tide turns, and the cold calculus of life and death over pride. This was the unbreakable rule in 1943. The Wehrmacht, battered from Stalingrad, stretched across the vastness of southern Russia, had no illusions. The Kuban Peninsula, a narrow strip of land between the Sea of Azov and the Caucasus foothills, was exposed. Holding it was expensive, dangerous, and almost suicidal. Every intelligence report, every weathered field map, every veteran officer advised withdrawal. The German 17th Army's strength had dwindled to 150,000 men, most exhausted, most low on supplies, encircled by the Red Army's 2nd Guards and 56th Armies, numbering nearly double. And yet, there was one man who rejected that rule. One man whose obsession with control, detail, and symbolic triumph over reality could rewrite the laws of war. Adolf Hitler. In 1943, Hitler looked at the Kuban Peninsula not as a strategic problem, but as a testament to German endurance. He saw numbers, reports, and logistics not as warnings, but as options to manipulate, to override, to command into obedience. He believed, stubbornly, that no Russian advance could force him to concede. But in 1943, one man's obsession changed everything. Hans-Ulrich Rudel, 30 years old, Prussian-born, hardened by the Eastern Front, had already become a legend among the Luftwaffe. He had destroyed over 500 tanks with pinpoint accuracy, survived more anti-aircraft fire than most pilots could imagine, and carried medals that weighed heavily on his chest but light in the conscience of a man obsessed with duty. You follow Rudel not as a spectator, but as a participant. You feel the vibration of his Ju-87 Stuka as it shudders under 37mm fire. You hear the whine of engines, the rattle of machine guns, the distant roar of artillery across the Kuban plains. The strategic context is simple yet devastating. After the disaster at Stalingrad in February, Hitler's southern flank is vulnerable. The Soviets have pushed back into the Kuban region, cutting off roads and supply lines, encircling pockets of German resistance. The bridgehead exists as a lifeline, a forward position designed to threaten the Caucasus oil fields. Losing it would be both a tactical and symbolic disaster. But Hitler's orders are unyielding. The Führer insists, hold the Kuban Bridgehead at all costs. No withdrawal, no negotiation, no concession.
You see Rudel, flying low over the mud-choked terrain, relaying reports of Russian T-34 tanks crossing the rivers, advancing in waves of 1,200 to 1,500 men. You hear him warn his commanders that infantry units are exhausted, supply lines tenuous, and reinforcements delayed by snow and shell fire. And yet, Hitler's decree is absolute. The bridgehead will hold. Rudel faces the impossible task. The lives of tens of thousands depend on holding ground that should have been abandoned weeks ago. The first dawn over the Kuban Peninsula in May 1943 brings a gray, oppressive light. You smell the acrid tang of burnt diesel and scorched earth before you hear the rattle of artillery. You feel the mud squelching beneath your boots, thick and clinging, as though the land itself resists your presence. Hans-Ulrich Rudel's Stuka shudders under the weight of bombs and cannon rounds, its wings vibrating in protest as he lifts off from the makeshift airstrip, one of dozens carved into frozen earth and sand. He scans the horizon. Russian armor moves in the distance, T-34s and KV-1s advancing in tight formations, 12 in one group, 8 in another, like metallic predators converging on weak prey. Rudel lines up his first dive. The Stuka screams downward, wings trembling, bomb doors open, 250-kilogram bombs clutched tightly beneath. He releases them with surgical precision. The explosions rip through tanks, hurling steel and fire into the muddy air. Below, German infantry clutch rifles and machine guns. Every man is exhausted, covered in mud, some with frostbitten hands, others with faces streaked by smoke and tears. You hear their shouted coordinates, the barked orders, the faint tremor of fear beneath disciplined voices. The survival of hundreds, possibly thousands, depends on Rudel's aim. By noon, the Russians begin their artillery barrages in earnest. 105mm howitzers pound the positions, shaking earth, flinging fragments into trenches. Rudel counts the distance, 1,500 yards, 1,200 yards, 900 yards. Each shell lands closer. German defensive positions, hastily dug into mud and sodden earth, shudder and collapse under the impact. Rudel radios for reinforcements. The 3rd Panzer Division, delayed by snow and mud over the previous 30 kilometers, is barely crawling forward. Commanders in the field know that without them, holding the southern perimeter is impossible. Yet Hitler's orders remain clear: the bridgehead must not fall. Rudel sees a column of 10 trucks attempting to cross a narrow bridge spanning a shallow, ice-choked river. Machine gun fire cuts through the vehicles. Steel screams as armored wheels catch fire. Soldiers tumble into the water. Rudel dives low, strafing tanks and suppressing Russian infantry. The wind buffets him. The smell of burning oil mixes with gunpowder and the stench of mud.
The Soviet command responds with brutal efficiency. 5 battalions converge from the east, another 3 from the north. Tanks advance in staggered columns. Infantry assaults the German lines in waves of 3,000 men, shouting, firing, driven by orders and desperation. Rudel circles, pulls up, dives again, and fires 37mm shells at tank tracks. One explosion, another. Smoke rises from 6 immobilized tanks.
Night falls. Rudel lands on the airstrip, boots sinking into mud, body aching from repeated dives, eyes gritty from smoke and ash. You hear the crack of distant sniper fire. The occasional scream pierces the night. 20 miles behind, in Berlin, Hitler pores over maps, scrutinizing unit positions, ration allocations, and minor details. He demands every hill and patch of earth be accounted for. The next morning, the Russians renew their assault. Rudel takes off again. You feel the impossibility pressing against the cockpit, ammo running low, fuel uncertain, 17th Army hanging by a thread. Russian reinforcements arrive in waves of 3,000 men. German artillery is half its original strength. Soldiers are exhausted, morale shaky. And yet, Hitler refuses to consider retreat. Rudel spots a squadron of 50 T-34s approaching from the south. The ground trembles under their weight. He dives from 2,000 meters, pulling up at the last second to avoid concentrated flak fire. Bombs fall in perfect alignment. 7 tanks destroyed. The rest scatter in a plume of smoke. Infantry chews into the German lines, but Rudel's air support suppresses them. The day drags into night again. Casualties mount. One infantry company reports 80% losses. Another is pinned down in the northern trenches. Rudel lands only to check ammunition, refuel, and rest for a few short minutes. He witnesses soldiers collapsing from exhaustion. He sees friends die in the mud. He feels the sharp pangs of helplessness, knowing that every decision, every precise bombing run only delays the inevitable. 2 days later, the southern perimeter is breached. German commanders consider evacuation, whispering among themselves, calculating which units can survive. Rudel takes off again, now flying under a dusk sky, engine whining, mud streaking his goggles. You feel the tension tighten like a cord around your chest. Every dive is more dangerous than the last. Anti-aircraft fire is heavier, and Russian machine gun nests are hidden in the forested edges of the peninsula. Rudel's bombs strike with deadly accuracy, tanks explode, infantry scatter. But for every Russian unit he destroys, 2 more seem to appear. The scale of the enemy's persistence is overwhelming, yet the bridgehead holds. The air above Kuban is a symphony of chaos. Artillery, machine guns, exploding shells, screaming engines. Rudel dives again, this time at a column of 20 tanks, supported by infantry at 500 meters. He releases bombs. 6 destroyed. Smoke, fire, and the stench of burning diesel fill the air. Ground forces rally. The northern flank is held by a hair. Rudel pulls up sharply, narrowly avoiding a 37mm shell. For Rudel, every sortie is a calculated gamble. He records destroyed vehicles, 15 on the first day, 20 on the second, and another 10 by the 4th day. German infantry clings to every hill, every riverbank, improvising with wrecked trucks, stones, and wooden planks. Ammunition runs low, medical supplies scarce. Men fight with desperation, shouting names, calling for brothers, firing until arms ache, until eyes blur with mud and blood.
You sense the psychological toll. Rudel, exhausted, barely eats or sleeps. The roar of engines, the constant rattle of small arms, and the explosions beneath him become a background hum to reality. Soldiers whisper of retreat, of survival, of the impossibility of obeying Hitler's orders. Yet the orders stand. Every hill must be held. Every village, every tree line is to remain German territory. By the end of the first week, casualties are staggering. The 17th Army has lost 10,000 killed, 25,000 wounded. Russian forces lose nearly 18,000 men, including 1,500 tanks. You hear the cries of the wounded, see the mud-soaked bodies of fallen soldiers, and feel the weight of every command decision. A sudden Russian push threatens the northern sector. Rudel's aircraft engages in a desperate low-level bombing run, strafing infantry and armored vehicles alike. The ground trembles beneath explosions. The line wavers. You count 500 meters to the Russian tanks. 400 meters. 300 meters. Infantry fire at every approaching man. German engineers blow bridges to slow advancement. Rudel circles again, bombs falling like deadly rain. 7 tanks destroyed. The Russian assault falters. Night falls again, and for a brief moment, Rudel and the surviving soldiers breathe. Fires burn across the landscape, marking destroyed equipment, but also illuminating the stubborn resilience of men who refuse to yield. Every exhausted body, every soaked uniform, every dirt-caked face tells the story of impossibility achieved.
The bridgehead survives. Rudel lands one last time, surveying the destruction. The rivers clogged with wrecked vehicles, the trenches filled with exhausted, mud-covered soldiers. Relief washes over him, but the cost is written everywhere. The impossible action, the defiance of logic and strategy, has saved the bridgehead, but at a price that will never be forgotten. The immediate effect is clear. The Kuban Bridgehead survives. Hitler's obsession prevents a tactical retreat, holding a beachhead that allows limited German access to the Caucasus. To the Soviets, the stubbornness of German forces shocks command. They revise attack plans, allocate additional divisions, and delay their southern offensive by weeks. What they didn't know was the hidden cost. Tens of thousands of German soldiers are lost or incapacitated. Supply lines are overextended. Morale suffers. Hitler's insistence on holding symbolic ground accelerates the depletion of Germany's southern army, setting conditions for future retreats across Ukraine. Strategically, Rudel's actions prolong the life of the bridgehead, but they also deepen the Wehrmacht's vulnerability. The Soviet High Command uses intelligence from these battles to refine combined arms tactics, blending armor, artillery, and air support in ways that will dominate future campaigns. The ripple extends beyond the front. The German command system is exposed as rigid, driven by obsession rather than reality. Hitler's micromanagement at the Kuban becomes a case study in the dangers of overreach, a cautionary tale repeated in post-war analyses. Hans-Ulrich Rudel survives the Kuban, flying missions across the Eastern Front until 1945. He receives the Knight's Cross with oak leaves, swords, and diamonds. He survives the war, lives until 1982, and recounts the Kuban with an unflinching eye, remembering every soldier, every tank, every scream in the mud. Names matter. Oberstleutnant Otto Kruger, killed at Hill 112. Gefreiter Johann Meyer, lost in the river crossing. Hauptmann Franz Bauer, wounded twice, but returning to lead his men. These men, ordinary yet extraordinary, endured Hitler's orders because they had no choice, only courage. If this story moved you, please hit that like button. Every click tells the algorithm this piece of history is worth remembering. We're dedicated to rescuing these forgotten stories from the archives. If you want to join us on this mission, please subscribe and turn on notifications. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment with your city or state and tell us if someone in your family served. Thank you for ensuring that Hans-Ulrich Rudel and the 150,000 men of the Kuban Bridgehead do not disappear into silence. They deserve to be remembered.